Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Lost Phoenix Gaming, the home of tips, tricks, guides, and tunes to Forza Horizon. And it doesn't seem that long ago, but I was making a video talking about the Forza Horizon networking issues and the Teredo fix and all this other stuff that everybody's been having loads of problems with. And it turns out that, yes, whilst it does sort of work, and it did work perfectly, there's a few Windows updates recently which has completely changed the game. And I'm going to go through this stuff with you today and show you the current method of what works and what doesn't. We'll first off start looking at the network diagnostics error. Gives me a support ID in case I want to contact support. Got a server ID of the one it was trying to connect to but was giving me problems. Quality of connection, success, 15 locations, so it has found servers. It's just struggling to connect to them. Region West Europe in 0.036 seconds, which is pretty quick. IPsec, which is all connected to the authentication of services. Failed to resolve the server address. Check your DNS settings and try again. DNS domain name server. I know my DNS is fine because I can load web pages, I can load other stuff up and it works fine. And I've even checked this stuff with my default ISP, DNS settings, with my Google settings, as well as my Cloudflare, and it does all the same stuff. So it's definitely not my DNS, but I'll be looking into this and I'll be walking through with you what I've done and what I've discovered as a fix for this at the current time. Types of network. Yes, there are more than one type of network when we're looking at this, and it is important to understand it so that we can look at things and realise where the problems are occurring. So this is the internet. This is how it works, right? It is, isn't it? Right? This is how it works. Well, this is how most people think the internet works. For the most part, they're correct. Although there is a little bit more to it than this, and it can get a little bit complicated. If we have a look at this, on the right-hand side, we've got our home network. We've got a house, we've got a router, we've got our Xbox, we've got a PC, a couple of phones, maybe a tablet, you know. That connects to an internet provider. This is the people you pay for your internet connection. And that connects out to the World Wide Web, you know, the internet where everything lives, all the stuff in the world ever. And somewhere out in this world, there's Xbox Live. And on these servers, they're running multiplayer sessions of games such as Forza Horizon. Your Xbox, your PC, that all connects through the internet, goes over to Xbox Live, connects to a game, and it's all good. It all works nicely. Which, yeah, that's the theory of it. It should work like that, but it doesn't always. And I'm going to go through a bit of basic networking here. So if you guys are familiar with IPv6 addressing, IPv4 addressing, Teredo servers, you can skip this part. I've time-stamped everything so that you can actually get to the point where I start talking about a fix. But it is interesting to know this stuff because when you understand where exactly the problem comes from, it does give a better understanding of how the fixes work in resolving the issues. First up, we've got the IPv4 home network. This is what you'll have at home. You have your house and you have a router, internet hub, or whatever you call it, and you've got all your stuff connected to it. You've got an Xbox, you've got a PC, you've got a couple of phones, maybe a tablet. And what this router does, it allocates addresses. It gives each device connected to your network, connected to the internet in your house, its own address. But that address is only local, and it uses something called a NAT. And you will see this error when you have these sort of problems with Xbox Live, because it will tell you your NAT is either open, which is what you want, moderate, which you can live with, or strict, which means you're basically getting no multiplayer goodness whatsoever. This router sits here and it's got a base address on the network. It's your gateway. And this is like 192.168.1.1, although it does change depending on your router. And this then uses the NAT to allocate addresses to all other devices. As you can see, the Xbox is 0.2, 0.3 for a PC, 0.4, 0.5 for the other devices. And this is what handles connections to the outside world. When you pay for your internet, you get given a single line of connection into your house. And that connection ends up getting translated at your router into the other devices, and that manages all the requests in and out of that network. When it connects to the internet provider gives you a fixed address, and I've given it an IPv4 address here for the case of simplicity, and that's 69.89.31.226, which is a typical example. And that's your network. So you've got your first bit, which is inside your house, which manages everything your devices do and the connections and the service requests and all this. And it goes out to the internet provider, which give you a pipe out to the rest of the world. So let's have a look at this as a bigger picture. When you look at this as a bigger picture, you can see that there's two types of network. There's the IPv4 network, which you just looked at with that familiar numbering scheme. And then there's this other one over in the corner called the IPv6 network. So it's like the Internet Protocol version 4 and Internet Protocol version 6. And as you can imagine, version 6 is actually the newer one. The reason there's two types of network is because there's so many devices connected, so many servers, so many things. We're not talking home networks here or sub networks. We're talking actual general public-facing servers. There's so many in the world that people have actually run out of address ranges for them. So we've had to move over to a different counting system. And as you can see, they are different. The IPv6 is like FE90::0242 and so forth. It's hexadecimal. The IPv4 is based around base 10 decimal number systems. The IPv6 centered around the base 16 hexadecimal system. Going back to the internet, a connection comes out of your house, goes to internet provider, then it goes and looks up the web page or service or whatever it's requesting on something called a DNS, a domain name server. And that acts as like a giant phone book, like a giant contact list for all these other servers around the internet. And then it just relays that onto them through a series of nodes, which are other servers. And then when it gets what it wants, it comes back. And that happens in fractions of a second. When you click on a link, you load a web page, like you're sitting at home watching this video, you've clicked this link, and that's connected out to a YouTube server. And that's sent the data back to your computer, which has rendered it in the browser, and now it's playing, and now you're listening to me talking about computer networks. Because we've got two different types of network with two different distinct language systems for their address naming, things start to get a bit confusing. It's like having a Japanese person talking to an English person. You need somebody in the middle to sort of communicate and translate that. And this is what Teredo does. You've seen this error, the Teredo not qualifying. And that's when the Teredo server cannot make a sufficient connection. So as part of this, as you can see, it goes out to the internet provider, looks up using the domain name server. Then it has to go to a Teredo server, which then takes the v4 language, converts it into v6 language, and sends it on to where it wants to go. And Xbox Live, from what I can gather, is a v6 only. This is why Microsoft are quite pushy about the Xbox working best on an IPv6 network. So it needs to translate, and that all goes through. It looks it up, translates it, sends it to where it's going, takes the response, translates it back, sends it back down, and it goes back into your house. And then your router does its work and sends that request that data over to the relevant device, which all this happens in fractions of a second, and it's pretty much unnoticeable for the most part. The problem does come with Teredo, where Matt's server, that translation server, can't connect to the server it needs to connect to get the response, or doesn't get a correct response back, or response back it can't understand. And this is like the qualification issue. So what can we do about that then? We have to have a look at a fix, don't we? We have to find a way of doing it. And if everyone who's just skipped my basic guide to networking, and it is a basic guide to networking, has skipped all this stuff, and you've come straight here, this is where I'll be looking at the solution. And when you look into this stuff, and it says not qualified, not working, and all this, I like to do a few little checks. Command prompt is definitely your friend. I run it as a administrator because that way it's got escalated privileges, so it can actually change settings properly. There is a command that I type in here, netsh interface Teredo show state, and it basically tells me what the state of Teredo is, if it's working or not. And I'm sitting here, enterprise client, Windows 1910.ipv6.microsoft.com, which is their one, which is Microsoft's. You can check this stuff as well by going to settings, into gaming, and you've got Xbox networking right there. So give that a click, and let's see what comes up. This is where you see your NAT type, your server connectivity, and you see all this sort of stuff. Internet is connected, Xbox Live Services reporting online. But I've got Teredo is unable to qualify, and server connectivity is blocked. So basically both parts of this problem are not working for me. I'm clicking the fix it button as per the standard Microsoft response to see if it makes a difference. So it does say we tried fixing the problem, check again. So okay, let's check again, shall we? What comes up? NAT type server connectivity. Teredo is unable to qualify and server connectivity is blocked. Let's go and have a look again at the show state, because I do like doing stuff in command line. You know, I'm a bit of a geek, right? But you don't have to do this at the moment, but I'm doing it just to check. And yeah, nothing's changed. Enterprise client, Windows 1910, or the slot, it's all the same. The big problem is that there was an update. There's a few updates ago, actually, which caused a few service changes within Windows 10. And you have to go and look at this. If you go in again, type services, it comes up like this. And again, I'll go and run it as an administrator because it gives me escalated privileges to do what I need to do. And there's a few things you need to look at for this one. I'm going to scroll down, and the first one you're looking for is IP helper. This is one that Microsoft tell you to check. So I'm going to look at that, and it's stopped. So let's start the service, although I'm going to go into it and show you the properties. I have got it on automatic. Microsoft like recommending you to put it on manual, but I put it on automatic. And I've just started this server. So I'm going to apply it. So that service is done. IP translation converts V4 to V6 on your network types. You know, so sort of important. Automatic, once again, Microsoft say manual, but I say automatic because you have it starting with Windows, and I've started it. And if it does come on, you can always click just restart, because sometimes starting it and stopping it does make a difference. But in my case, it was stopped. So it is started and is running. IPsec policy agent. Remember I said about that IPsec number? That normally needs to be running, although not so much one that Microsoft tell you about. That's that, automatic. Let's make a start on it, shall we? Let's start that. So that's started that service. That's not too bad. I've got quite a few others, KTM, which you don't need to worry about that one. All you need to do is make a jump right down to the bottom of the list. You've got all these Xbox stuff. Don't worry about accessories. Live Auth Manager, like the Live Authentication Manager. That's what you want. Automatic on that one. Mine's running. You can stop it, restart if you want. Xbox Live Game Save. That's on manual. I tend to leave it on that, to be fair, but it definitely does need to be running. So let's make a start on that one. Let's run that one. Click OK, and Xbox Live Networking Service. Right, this is the big one. Microsoft say manual, I say automatic. Mine's running, but if I stop it and restart it, it gives it just a restart, really. And that's those services. I'll put them in the description. That's what you need to look at. So let's do a check again. Let's have a look and see if these are actually made a difference. So NAT type, server connectivity. Okay, NAT type open, server connectivity connected. And there you go. It's worked. It's fixed it. That's it. That's pretty decent. Let's show the state, shall we? And it should have a lot more details, and it does. It's got the Microsoft IPv server there. Got a port specified, and I'll talk about that in a moment. State is qualified. Managed network. Cone, UPNP, yes. Port preserving, yes. I've got my local mapping, I've got my external mapping. I've blocked out my external mapping simply because that's my personal IP address and I don't want to show that. But my internal mapping is what I said before about the internal networks and your router allocating different devices, different addresses. But I'm going to go and set this to enterprise client, because if you do have a Teredo issue, go in and do this. I've set enterprise client up. The motor's on. If it says client, I'm doing a copy and paste halfway between a second screen here of the other stuff. If your Teredo is a bit weird, swap it out for TrexFi. I don't need to be doing it at this point because the Microsoft one is reporting okay, but I'm showing you this anyway in case your Teredo is having problems and Microsoft servers are having an off day like they usually do. So I've set the Teredo client to use the TrexFi server for translation. Next up, I'm looking to set a port because you need to set ports to open so that the application and the router knows how to communicate. And I've set it as 3544, which is the default for Teredo anyway. And I'll show you how to open these up in a moment. I've already got mine set, you may not, because mine was always set from before and I've had to do a bit of a change in order to do the demonstration. So I've reset it back to port 3544. Let's have a look at the interface. Okay, it's gone client TrexFi. That's not good. So let's scan up. Let's go enterprise client again and let's have a look. And yeah, okay, 30 seconds. Let's go back in and check the gaming because sometimes this can take a few seconds to connect. And it should be okay because it's got 30 seconds on the refresh time on release. So let's have a look. Teredo unable to qualify, but I'm connecting. It doesn't seem to like my TrexFi. Fair enough. Let's check again because I do believe this is to do with the refresh time on releases for the connections. So there you go, open NAT and connected server. And that's using the TrexFi one. So I've shown it working with Microsoft. I've shown it working with TrexFi. So that's pretty much your server connectivity issues done. I did say that I've port forwarded. I have set a default port up for this. So let's talk about port forwarding. Okay, a bit of a diagram now. Port forwarding, right. We're back in your house. You've got your PC here running Forza Horizon. The router's gone and give it 192.168.1.3 as a IP address. But I've set Xbox Live Services to use 3544. And that's the port, and that's what's in bold. And when it sends a connection out to your router, it sends it saying, this is who I am. I'm 192.168.1.3, and I'm asking for a connection to this server on port 3544, and the router goes, okay, fair enough, no problems, and then sends it through to the internet provider. And if it does this and sends it through to your internet provider, this is called open NAT, or an open port, because this is a way that your computer accesses other computers on the internet, such as game servers. So if it all goes through, the port gets forwarded, hence the word port forwarding. The router forwards it from your computer out to your internet provider and out to whatever game server or website you want to be connecting to. Email has its own particular port. Web browsing has its own particular port. Teredo has a few ports, but the default one's 3544, so I'm using it in this example. The problems come when you don't actually get that port forwarded. So your computer can send a connection to your router saying, here I am on this address. I want a connection to this server on this port. And it sends it to your router, but if your router doesn't forward it outside to the world, out to your internet provider, it actually just dies, it stops. And that's when you get your port forwarding failing. And that's when your Teredo fails as well, because obviously you're not making any connection. So how do you set up port forwarding? It is actually pretty simple, but it does differ router to router. And I'm going to show you how I do it on my router. This is my own domestic internet provider supplied router hub, which is crap, but I have to use it at the moment. And I'll just show you where this stuff is on a Netgear router, because that's my access point that I use for, well, everything else. So here I am now. I'm on my BT Smart Hub 2 manager. And you get onto that with your local IP, which is like 192.168.1.254. Remember my IP4 networks? And you want to go to advanced, and you have a look at firewall. And this will be different for a lot of people. And these are the ports. These are the ports that are required in order to have Forza Horizon working properly on different devices. You've got the ports there, you've got the TCP and the UDP, which are different type of connections. You've got those ports there. You've got different ports for the Xbox One. You've got different ports for the Xbox Series X, and the Series S is part of that as well. And now that Steam's come online, you need other ports to accommodate Steam as well. So depending on your platform, you're going to need to make sure that these ports are down on your open list. And I will put this stuff in the description, but I will show you on my router how to open a port. There are lots of different routers, lots of different stuff out there. And I do suggest, if you're struggling with this, have a look at a website called portforward.com. And it's got a list of routers with guides of how to access the menus and add port forwarding onto them, because it's far too many to me to go into individually, but this is a very good resource for a guide, so I'll link to that in the description. When you go into your advanced settings on your router, on mine I have to go into the firewall settings, and you go into your advanced settings on your router and it'll be located under port forwarding, and I'll show you that in a bit. But when you go into your router, which I've done here, you can see a list of all these ports, and you can see that the grey ones have been added automatically by something called the R8000 Nighthawk, which is actually my Netgear router. It's mostly Minecraft. It's added some Teredo stuff as well for machine 14, which is my Xbox, and machine 11, which is my PC. But you can see the ones in white here, and I've added these myself to open Teredo up. And the Kira is the name of my PC, by the way. So I've got port 80, I've got 3544, 500, 53, and 88. And you can see this stuff here. You just put your name in, and you pick your ports. And I'll show you how to add this, because looking at this, I think I've missed one out. I've actually missed a port out, although I think it is forwarding on automatically. So what I'll do is cut to the top, and that gives me an option to create a new port forwarding rule. Okay, so let's click that. Let's give it a name, Akira Teredo. Slightly different thing. Select device. I'm blurring this out because I don't want to be showing my MAC addresses and my devices. So I'll pick my PC off that one anyway. And it comes up Akira. And you put your external ports on. And if you've got a port range, you put your start and your end. But I'm just putting a single port in at the moment, which is 4500. I've got my external, I've got my internal. And you get to set your protocol. And have TCP, UDP, or TCP and UDP. I know it's a UDP port, so I'm just going to add that. And there you go. It adds it. I can go and add another one if I want, although I do need to change that. I need to save it, which is what I've done. It's saving the changes. And if you scroll down, you can see I've actually got Akira Teredo, 4500 port, UDP. So that is that port added, and that's how you add a port on a BT Home Hub. So that isn't too bad. If you're on BT, I've just shown you how to do it. Awesome. UPNP, which is Universal Plug and Play. This does this stuff automatically for you, so you don't need to manually do it, although I have anyway. UPNP is on, and you definitely want that turned on, because otherwise you get this UPNP error in your network. Although if you do have some enterprise kit, it probably isn't turned on as default. A lot of guides will also talk about the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, where you can add a device in and it basically just passes all connections through unfiltered. And you click it again. I'm blurring this out for purposes of security, but I wouldn't do that, because it just leaves your PC, your access points, anything like that open to attack. And when you can be going in and doing port forwarding, it's a simpler way. This is my Netgear. This is my gaming router, which I can't use as a router at the moment. Blurring out a load of stuff for personal reasons, because it's got passwords up there. And this is the advanced settings. Shows me all some stuff about my network. It's in access point mode, but I can show you where the menu is. If you click on administration, actually it's not, it's advanced setup. You go down, you've got port forwarding / port triggering. So that would give you a similar menu to I showed you on the BT box. You've also got UPNP down the bottom as well. So that's when you can switch UPNP off on a Netgear. Definitely check out something like portforward.com to get into details with your actual router, because you can search it. Although what I will say is you do not need to download and buy their router admin software that they keep advertising on there. You don't need it. I wouldn't trust it. You don't need it. You can go in, type in your addresses into your web browser, and it'll work. You can do that, save yourself money, save yourself some security issues, but go on the website and get that information if you're not sure how to get into your router to do this stuff. So that's port forwarding. That's pretty straightforward, that is. And that will open the ports up so that your game can communicate. So we know how to set ports, we know how to make sure UPnP is on, and we know how to make sure that all the services that are required are running. And so that's basically the fix. I've added that port, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another check on this one. And it's open and it's connected and it works. So that's not so much of a problem. I'm going to do a show state on this one, and yes, it's enterprise client Trex 5, 20 seconds refresh time, port 3544, qualified, unmanaged, UPnP yes, port preserving yes. I've got my port forwarding all happily sitting there, as you can see. I've got my internal and my external both working on the same port. So that really is sort of a fix on this one. You have to go in, you have to look at the services, make sure it's running, make sure everything as it should be. make sure you've got your port forwarding set up properly on your router and on your PC if need be. Certainly go in and set enterprise client if it comes up as client, because that will restrict it. And that's, again, going back to the original video I made on this. But going back into the game after a restart, I've not restarted the computer yet. Loading the game up fresh, it's trying to find an Horizon Life session, which it should do because everything's telling me it's working. The Teredo is qualified, the multiplayer is connected, so it just needs to find a server. So I'm going to have a little run down the motorway and let's have a look. Okay, Horizon Live session found. There you go. It's fixed it. It's working. Let's see if it connects or gives me an error. Oh, there you go. All the cars have disappeared and I'm now online. I'm in Horizon Life and it's working. That's not too bad. That's all right. Happy enough with that. And that's after going through and checking all this stuff. I've got to invite players. I've got no friends. Nobody loves me. But I can have a look at the player list. I've got all these players. At the time of recording, these are the people that are in my session. There you go. Scrolling down. A lot of different names down there. And that's basically it. That's it. That's the fix. It's a bit of a longer video. It's a bit more laborious because I've had to sort of go through and explain a bit of networking. And also start looking at services, start looking at port forwarding and sort of covering off sort of the more techie side, which people should not be worrying about. Nobody should be worrying about this. You turn your PC on, load the game, it works, jobs are good, and let's get on and have some fun. You shouldn't be sort of going around with your sort of network administrator head on. Luckily, I'm able to do that because I've got a good sort of head around networking and I can do it. But there's a lot of people that can't, and I think it's bad that you have to. So what happens after a reboot? Because sometimes you can go into this and it just won't work once you reboot a computer. So I've gone in, I've checked my Xbox networking settings, and as you can see, it's coming up as open and connected. So it's actually saved that configuration between reboots. How this fares between Windows updates is anybody's guess at the moment, because Microsoft like to reset everybody's settings on updates and actually change things around under we know best mentality. And this is the mentality which ended up turning off half the services you need for multiplayer gameplay, which you've had to go and either re-enable or ensure that they are set to automatic. So we shall see, but this is the process. This is what works as of now. And if a Windows update does reset things, it's just a case of working through these steps and making sure that everything is switched on, everything's connected, you've got enterprise client in, and that your Teredo gets changed if you're having problems with the default one. So that is the video. A bit longer than expected, but thank you for stopping with me, and hopefully this will definitely give you a good insight into how these sort of networks work. If you do find this useful, leave me a comment and drop a like. You'd be surprised how long it's taken me to get all this stuff together. It took me hours to put those network diagrams together, but that is that. Hopefully this is a fix. Hopefully this definitely helps you out and gets you all online, gets you enjoying the trial, the playground games, all the multiplayer goodness you've got with this stuff. So until next time, thank you for watching. Take it easy and happy driving.